Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we are exploring one of the absolute most fascinating character arcs in the entire Yaenddarr Chronicles. We're zooming way in on the sentient, ever-watching planet of Yaenddarr to follow Sir Glyndor's incredible 5-chapter awakening arc. You know, this isn't just a standard story about a knight getting some shiny new weapon. No, this is a literal masterclass in duality, in self-acceptance and evolution, and it's all structured by the living biome itself. It's high energy, it's deeply emotional, and the world building? Honestly, it's just phenomenal. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this brilliant quote right here from the River King perfectly, illustrates the core conflict we're dealing with. Sir Glyndor is, at his core, a man divided. On one hand, you've got this proud, highly disciplined human knight, but on the other hand, he possesses a frog form that he basically views as a curse, right? It's a vulnerability that makes him feel completely helpless. But here's the kicker about Yaenddarr. The environment there doesn't just challenge your physical strength, it literally forces you to confront your deepest inner truths. So here's how we're going to map out Sir Glyndor's trial-based journey today. We'll start with the verdant waterway, move into the amphibian mirror, check out the dual current, explore the river's heart, and finally look at the journey to Pine Brooks. All right, part 1, the verdant waterway. Now, what's really interesting about this is how Sir Glyndor's journey kicks off. He takes an abrupt plunge into a lush river forest, where the water actually holds memories. It's this wild ecosystem where mysterious, amphibious spirits are just watching him from the mist, and the river itself acts as a living, breathing teacher. Just think about the stark contrast between his two halves as he navigates this terrain. On one side, the human knight. Rigid discipline, steel combat, pure strength. It's heavy, forceful, totally unyielding. But then, contrast that with the frog form. It relies on amphibious agility, an innate water sense, and, vulnerability. It's fast, it's flowing, it's deeply connected to the environment. And Sir Glyndor? Well, he spent his entire life relying on that rigid steel and just completely suppressing the fluid amphibian side.
But the planet won't let him get away with that imbalance anymore. A translucent river sentinel, woven literally from the current itself, appears and immediately subjects Sir Glyndor to 4 sequential tests: elemental water, the amphibian mirror, the dual current, and the river's heart. These are definitely not just random fights. They're a perfectly structured curriculum designed specifically to force him to reconcile his divided nature. So the very first test is elemental water. The river just explodes upward into this massive water serpent, a creature made of pure current and pressure. Now, initially, Sir Glyndor tries to fight it exactly like a knight would. He's blocking and striking with rigid force. But you can't block a river, right? He quickly realizes he has to step into the current, redirecting that serpent's immense momentum with rapid, circular, flowing sword arcs instead of those rigid blocks. He has to learn to flow. Which brings us to part 2, the amphibian mirror. Having barely passed that first physical test, Sir Glyndor gets carried deeper into the waterway. The terrain shifts, turning into this perfectly still, glowing blue pool. But this is the amphibian mirror, and it outright refuses to reflect Sir Glyndor's human appearance. Instead, when he looks down, he sees his small, highly vulnerable frog form just staring right back up at him. And guys, this is the turning point of his entire arc. The reflection actually steps right out of the water and speaks to him, which forces Sir Glyndor to confront his deep-seated fear of being helpless, of being something other than a tough man in armor. It's here he finally realizes that he isn't half a knight, he's 2 knights in one body. By finally embracing his frog form, he unlocks some absolutely incredible abilities. We're talking underwater breathing, immense leaping agility, and this power to sense currents and truth. Think about that for a second. I mean, how often do we suppress parts of ourselves because we think they make us vulnerable? True strength, as Sir Glyndor discovers right here, requires total self-acceptance. And the moment he accepts his reflection, those 2 forms fuse, allowing him to shift instantly and effortlessly. Let's move to and see how this builds in part 3, the dual current. Now that he's actually accepted his form, Sir Glyndor steps into a living arena of flowing water for his combat application test. And wow, he faces this intense, rapid-fire combat sequence against 3 amphibious night spirits. First up is the leap, which attacks with just unbelievable speed, forcing Glyndor to shrink into his frog form to dodge, and then instantly shift back to human form to strike. Next is the current, an opponent so wild and unpredictable that rigid defenses just fail completely. Sir Glyndor has to weave between his forms seamlessly just to survive it. And finally, he faces the mirror, a perfect clone of himself that shifts exactly as fast as he does.
During this desperate, intense fight with the clone, he realizes he's fighting way too mechanically. He's shifting too early, then too late, trying so hard to rigidly match his opponent's moves. He sinks underwater, and the river whispers this incredibly profound advice. Stop copying, start flowing. He learns he has to let go of all that rigid discipline and instead rely on true blended instinct to achieve perfect combat synergy. And when he finally does, he moves as one unified being. It's totally awesome.
Moving on to part 4, the river's heart. With his combat skills completely synchronized now, the river guides Sir Glyndor deep into its oldest, darkest basin. The water down here actually pulses like a literal heartbeat. This is where he meets the towering, emerald-eyed River King, who creates this massive vortex of memories, revealing some mind-blowing lore for us. Centuries ago, an ancient pact was formed between the amphibious river folk and the human Knights of the Vale. Decades ago, this pact resulted in the birth of the very first dual-blooded. Sir Glyndor suddenly sees that he isn't cursed at all. No, he is the proud, incredibly rare heir to this unified lineage. And deep at the bottom of this exact basin, an ancestral weapon has been waiting in dormancy just for him. So the crucial point is, this revelation pushes Sir Glyndor to dive to the very bottom of the basin. Using both his human pressure tolerance and his frog form's water breathing, he finally reaches a stone altar. Resting right there is a broken, rusted blade. But the moment he touches it, fully accepting both halves of his soul, the rust just dissolves. It resurrects into the Masamune of tides. It's a shimmering, aqua-steel weapon of immense power that literally breathes and flows right along with him.
Which brings us to the final chapter, Part 5, Journey to Pinebrooks.
Stepping out of the verdant waterway completely transformed, Sir Glyndor is no longer a conflicted man in heavy armor. He is a fully realized knight of two currents, carrying a breathing blade and facing a sunlit path. But before he leaves, the river sentinel shows him one final vision, the distant sanctuary of Pinebrooks, sitting high above the clouds. And brilliantly, we see that Sir Glyndor's journey is actually part of a massive convergence. Just look at the 4 elemental champions being drawn here. We've got Solarin with storm and fire, Celestia, the frost child of ice, Archlight, the arc-forged technomancer, and now joining them, Sir Glyndor, the river's knight of water.
So, what should we all take away from this? Yes, Sir Glyndor's story is a fantastic epic fantasy, for sure. But the core message? It's universally applicable. True strength is not found by relying only on the rigid armor we put up, the steel we show the world. Real power is unlocked through the fluid, complete acceptance of every single part of who we are. The very things we might perceive as our biggest weaknesses, just like Sir Glyndor's frog form, are often the exact keys we need to unlock our absolute highest potential.
And man, that leaves us with an incredible setup for the rest of the Chronicles. 4 elemental champions, all newly awakened, and all being pulled by fate toward the town of Pinebrooks. 4 currents, 1 convergence. How in the world will the fluid, adaptable river's knight clash with the raw storm, the freezing ice, and the precise tech of the others? You definitely won't want to miss what happens when these paths finally collide.